Topic of my project was kind of inspired from the tragic injury of Buffalo Bills football player Damar Hamlin this past NFL season. Just for some quick background, Hamlin went to make what seemed to be a routine tackle at the time, after which he collapsed to the ground as a result of sudden cardiac arrest. The game was canceled, and this unfortunate event left his teammates and the NFL community at a complete loss. So, from the perspective of sports psychology, depending on the severity of the injury, how demoralizing can one injury be for their brothers in arms? Or can it have the opposite effect? What I hope to accomplish is by looking at the popular team oriented sports in America, which are going to be basketball and football in this project. I'm going to be documenting whether or not teams have thrived through that kind of adversity, or are they more likely to not be able to put it behind themselves through the circumstances of said injury. So the question I'm here to ask and answer is, do severe sports injuries unite teams together through adversity, or do they cause their inevitable downfalls? And although teams are united regardless of whether or not one player may be more valuable than the other, I'm going to break down the player injuries into categories of significant impact. For example, comparing an MVP or all-star level player and role players who are integral to team success, but probably not as game-changing as the one I mentioned. And I'm also going to categorize the injuries in terms of the level of impact and importance, like whether or not the injury just simply derailed the team season or did it completely change the trajectory of a sports franchise. And I'm going to be listing examples that could be better or for worse. So, from the perspective of sports psychology, depending on the severity of the injury, how demoralizing can one injury be for their brothers in arms? Or can it have the opposite effect? What I hope to accomplish is by looking at the popular team oriented sports in America, which are going to be basketball and football in this project. I'm going to be documenting whether or not teams have thrived through that kind of adversity, or are they more likely to not be able to put it behind themselves through the circumstances of said injury. So the question I'm here to ask and answer is, do severe sports injuries unite teams together through adversity, or do they cause their inevitable downfalls? So next up, we're going to the NBA side to take a look at Paul George and the Indiana Pacers. Leading up to the 2010 season and throughout that decade, there were a few teams that were dominating the Eastern Conference. These were the LeBron James-led Cavaliers up until the point where he joined the Miami Heat to form that Big Three, the Big Three Boston Celtics, and in the 2009 and 10 seasons, the Dwight Howard-led Orlando Magic. However, there were two young teams on the rise who oddly share similar fates. Those were the Chicago Bulls, led by the youngest MVP in NBA history, Derrick Rose, and the Indiana Pacers, led by an emerging superstar in Paul George. The Pacers selected George 10th overall in the 2010 draft out of Fresno State, and it became evident over the next 7 years that they made the right decision in selecting him. So, in his rookie season, Paul George made the all rookie second team and helped his team make the playoffs in his very first year. And throughout his time in Indiana, George helped the Pacers reach successes that really haven't been seen since the Reggie Miller days in the 90s. George helped his team make a run to the Eastern Conference Finals in 2013, where he met the dominant LeBron led Miami Heat. The series went back and forth, but the Pacers ended up losing in Game 7 to the eventual NBA champion, Miami Heat. But considering this was his third year and he was averaging about 20 points per game in the playoffs, most people thought the sky was the limit for the young superstar talent. But unfortunately, this wasn't quite the case. And despite team struggles, Paul George continued to improve his elite play throughout the next couple seasons. But in the summer of 2014, George suffered a gruesome leg injury during a scrimmage for Team USA, which devastated NBA fans along with hopeful Pacers fans. The injury foreshadowed the beginning of the end for the George-led Pacers, and since the injury occurred after the 2013-2014 season, the Pacers were going to be without their superstar forward for the majority of the next season. So what were the results of losing the biggest piece on their team? Well, as expected, the Pacers struggled and ended up missing the playoffs for the first time since Paul George arrived in 2010. George did come back strong, though, after the injury, averaging 23 points per game in the next two seasons, which actually at the time was the most he averaged throughout his career. But the damage was already done, figuratively and literally. Interesting enough, this was an occurrence where the injury of a player devastated an entire franchise for years to come. Because after Paul George requested a trade to leave the team 2 years later after the injury in 2017, the Pacers were sent into turmoil, either not making it past the first round of the playoffs or not making the playoffs at all since his departure. Now, in this case, compared to the one that previously was mentioned about the whole Damar Hamlin situation in the Buffalo Bills, the loss of a potential MVP candidate and franchise player was too much of a burden to overcome for the Pacers. I mean, it makes sense that losing the player who was responsible for a majority of a team's success would leave the team in disarray because of their absence, right? This takes us back to the NFL, and we're going to talk about Carson Wentz and the Philadelphia Eagles. In the 2016 NFL Draft, the Eagles selected Wentz, who was a promising quarterback out of North Dakota State, at second overall. The Eagles were kind of hoping to land their franchise player at the QB position after years of mediocrity following the 3-year Michael Vick era, and were confident in selecting Wentz. His first year stats were pretty average at best, as expected from a rookie, and it was nothing special. But the Eagles fandom, coaching staff, and players were feeling pretty optimistic about the next season. But the results that were yet to come were definitely far from expected. In just his second year during the 2017 NFL season, Carson Wentz completely shattered all expectations, leading the Eagles to an 11-2 start while totaling a league best at the time 33 touchdowns and 7 interceptions. Throughout the season, Wentz was considered and to be predicted to win the MVP. And with everything headed in the right direction for the Eagles in their matchup against the Los Angeles Rams, the team was looking to keep building momentum into the playoffs. But unfortunately, while diving for a touchdown in the third quarter, Wentz took a hit on his lower body, resulting in tearing his ACL, thus ending what was at the time a perfect season for him. The Eagles managed to finish the rest of the season strong without Wentz, although it was pretty evident that they were struggling without their star player, which only makes sense. But they were now being led by a journeyman backup trying to fill the shoes of their MVP candidate quarterback. Pretty much everyone had written the Eagles off, which is why heading into the playoffs, they were the first number one seeded team to be listed as an underdog since 1970. And what had transpired throughout the playoffs was nothing short of a Rocky Balboa underdog story, who ironically is a Philadelphian fictional hero. And the Eagles surged their way to winning both playoff games behind backup Nick Foles, their successful run game, and their tough as nails defense, setting up a Super Bowl matchup with the New England Patriots. As I mentioned before, it's not a surprise to see a team not be able to reach their full potential because of something significant like losing an MVP caliber player. But in this case, the Eagles rallied around their team and back up Nick Foles through gutsy play calling and determination, and ended up beating the Patriots 41-33 to win the franchise's first Super Bowl with the backup quarterback that everyone doubted winning Super Bowl MVP. So looking at teams like the Eagles who managed to win despite their MVP candidate getting injured, and looking at a team like the Pacers that haven't found any kind of sustainable success since the Paul George injury, what if there was an instance where an injury worked out better for a team's success long term? And I'm not trying to justify an injury because at the end of the day, player health and safety are what matters most. But I couldn't help bringing up a team that had devastating injuries and still managed to come out top in the end. So led by a core of two-time MVP Stephen Curry, Klay Thompson, and Draymond Green, the Golden State Warriors had already won a championship, had a record-breaking season of 73-9, and another finals appearance, even though it was the infamous blown through one lead. And this was before adding former league MVP Kevin Durant. After adding two more rings to their mantle with this group, the Warriors were clear favorites to three-peat before Kevin Durant tore his Achilles and Klay Thompson tore his ACL in the finals, resulting in them losing to the Toronto Raptors. And to be at the very top for so long and experiencing the lowest of lows was devastating for the Warriors. To make matters worse, KD left the team in the offseason. And just when they thought they were going back to their original championship core, Klay Thompson suffered a torn Achilles in the offseason after he just tore his ACL in the finals the year before. And with all this seemingly bad luck occurring, everybody thought the dynasty was finally over. But leave it to the Warriors to manage to fail upwards. Because after Stephen Curry got injured, the Warriors fell to one of the worst records in the league, which at face value you would think is a bad thing, right? I mean, technically, yes, but not quite. All this did was enable the star players to rehab from their injuries, get back to being healthy, and hold top draft picks, which they ended up having the second overall pick in the draft and chose top prospect James Wiseman. And they also picked up three young players in the draft who became very important pieces to their success in Jordan Poole, Jonathan Kuminga, and Moses Moody. Long story short, the Warriors are right back in the finals. With a newly restructured team centered around the same three players who helped bring them their first championship in 2015, coming back since their loss a few years back, the Warriors ended up beating the Boston Celtics in Game 6, led by their franchise player and Finals MVP Stephen Curry. This team is an interesting occurrence that, despite having devastating injuries for a couple of seasons, it's still possible to return back to that level and have the same success. And in an odd sense, they wouldn't have been in that position to draft those important pieces to their team that helped them during the championship run if it weren't for those injuries in the first place. It also helps to have Steph Curry, but you get the point. To wrap all this up, I felt that it's important to state that despite the fact the Eagles did, which at the time was considered highly unlikely, in winning the championship without Wentz and the impressive numbers that he put up that season, I have to say that during all of my research between the two sports, it's a lot more possible in the NFL than it is in the NBA to find success, even in losing your star player. Because in the NBA, there are only 5 starters on the court at a time, and there's only a handful of all-star or superstar caliber players out of 32 teams. And it's difficult to win a championship as it is with a completely healthy roster. And having your franchise player injured almost always shuts that window completely. But in the NFL, since it's 11 players on offense and defense, one player doesn't necessarily have to carry the team on their backs compared to someone in the NBA, like 2018 LeBron James, for example, who had a near 30-point triple-double average in the finals and still lost, albeit to a literal God squad, but that's beside the point. But what is true for both of these respective sports is that teams do try their best to shoulder the burden of injured teammates. Like I've previously mentioned, and like John Michael Schmidt said, that it's your family, and those players are going to try their best for their family, regardless of the outcome or situation. It's just that more often than not, the amount is too heavy to overcome. But now that I think about it, I can't help but feel like I'm missing something here. Like when I was discussing my example where injuries actually managed to help the Golden State Warriors in the long run, there's definitely an example here that can probably further explain my point. Oh yeah, that's right.
Maybe a half-yard gain.
The fellows who work in the NFL are the best, and it's nice to have them back home.
So 3rd down and 10 now. Big play for the Patriots. Bledsoe gonna run it. Needs 10 yards. Oh, does he hit? Oh my!
And the ball, they're going to actually. It looks like they're going to rule that a fumble. And oh, look at Drew.
Over here. Congratulations. This has got to feel like, man, I don't believe this is happening to me, like a dream come true.
It's absolutely incredible. I mean, so it's an example of what happens when guys believe in each other. And I mean, there's so many reasons why we're here. I mean, Damon and Drew Bledsoe and my coach, you know, it's always with the support. The way the offensive line played today, the running backs, Antoine. I mean, it's just dream come true. Dream come true. Super Bowl chance.
How about the last drive? Up to that drive, about 88 yards passing. Pretty much ran the football. What about that last drive?
Well, look right over there, Tom. I know this never gets old. You win a choice of Cadillacs. The Cadillac.
This is not that easy. You do know that.
Oh, believe me, I do know that. It's what a game. What a game. What a tough opponent. But
struggle. Was it a struggle early to get your rhythm? Yeah.
P of Super Bowl 49. Tom, I'll ask you the same question I asked Coach Bell.
Oh, man, how good is this, boy? Huh? Here, let me hand it. No, let me hand it to you. Up. How sweet is that, Tom? The only 4-time MVP, the only quarterback, the first.
And this season was this one.
You know, it was an unbelievable year. You know, probably, you know, we fought through it more so than anything, and it's unbelievable to win this game. They played so well. I mean, the Rams defense, they played their butts off. What a great defense. They had a great plan.
But VA had all the confidence in us.
The team had a lot of confidence. We came together at the right time. I think we knew this was going to happen tonight, didn't we?